it may be that this is not a model that we query very often.
So I asked O1 to solve world hunger.
Hey, how can I help my clients use this? How would this be impactful? Scary to me was when you actually looked at their system card. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is September 17th, 2024. You're watching the Daily AI Show live, and today we are talking about Strawberry, aka the O1 preview model that came out last week from OpenAI. And with me today is Beth. We'll see if anybody else pops in the door here, but for now it's the two of us. I'm Brian, and we want to talk about not just like the high, okay, great, it came out. It's more about like, what are the use cases, right, Beth? Like what are people actually doing? Because the one thing we definitely know, we heard it from a lot of different people at OpenAI, as well as I think Sam Altman mentioned it, was, hey, this is a preview mode. And we red teamed it. We've sent it to our security. It was labeled apparently as a medium risk. They have their security board and internal teams that look at these, and they decided to release it as a preview. But really what they were saying is, hey, we're not quite sure of all the different places that this model might be super impactful. So what better way to find out than to release it to the wild and let people just come up with the most creative different ways? Now, Beth and I were just saying before we went live that the examples that we're seeing definitely seem to fall into a couple of broad categories, which are really no surprise, right, Beth? Like, we're seeing coding, a lot of coding, and we're seeing a lot of math, and we're seeing a lot of like critical thinking. Ethan Malik has shared things like breaking down the deep research papers and kind of exploding out those different topics into deeper reasoning. So anyway, that's sort of what we're talking about today. Yes, it came out. Yes, there's the features and functionalities, but what Beth and I really want to talk about, or anybody that shows up at the show, is really like, well, okay, so what, right? So what? They came out with a new model. Why do I care? If I'm a busy business professional, should I start using it? Should I replace GPT 4.0 with it? Like, what should I do, Beth? So let me kick it to you, Beth.
Thanks, Brian. I will kick it to you when I am finished my piece. Thank you very much.
We do have people coming in here in a second, so we'll have 3 in a minute.
That's awesome. So I think, yes, well, part of what is important to understand is that O1, first of all, is going to take a long time to come back to you if you give it enough work to work with, right? Like it says, like, you may wait 15 to 20 minutes to get the output from your input. If you haven't waited 15 or 20 minutes, I'm going to say, it doesn't have to be 15, but if it comes back fast, you're not giving it enough to chew on, right? So being really explicit and giving it some sort of like, you must prove this theorem in math, which was not my major. So if I said it wrong, terribly sorry. Or that sort of thing, or this is a really complicated code problem. And so I'm going to want you to give me this kind of stuff back. Pietro Giardina, and I will put a link to his X account.
Mm-hmm.
He's put together like a list of what his best practices are, and I'm just going to go through them. Be explicit about the reasoning chain by requesting a detailed breakdown. You're asking for more content. Guide decision making with hypothetical scenarios, right? Those are our examples. But what he does in his hypothetical examples are like, I want this is, let's say it's the baby on the train tracks problem, right? Train's coming, baby, lots of people on the train. He's saying, I want you to consider this in these frameworks, multiple frameworks, and then have that inform your answer. Give me an answer for all of those, right? So using your knowledge about your own expertise to add in the kinds of details that you want. And I'll just go over there are only 5. So that was Be explicit about the reasoning chain. Guide decision-making with hypothetical scenarios. Facilitate multi-step problem solving, especially for coding, which is why we're seeing like coders go nuts. Encourage counterfactual thinking, right? Like, why isn't this true? And leverage inner monologue for creative writing. So encouraging an inner monologue adds depth, makes characters more relatable, those sorts of things. I will put a link. We'll have a link to that in the description. So if you're watching this on you're watching the recording, it's right down there. Hi, Karl.
Yeah, Karl's here as well. So we got a team of 3 now, which is good. And Karl, I know that you're usually Johnny on the spot when it comes to these new releases. You not only post in our internal channels, you're pretty active inside of AI Exchange. Now that you've had a few days to sort of process O1 preview, it's never a great idea with any of these models to try to talk about everything it can do within 24 hours. We simply don't know enough, about all the things. And honestly, 5-6 days in, we still probably don't know a ton about what it's capable of. But based on what you've seen either on X or other places where people are sharing examples, what's your opinion right now of what it can do? Is it truly revolutionary? Is it just a small step? Where do you see it as of right now?
Well, I was looking at it more for my immediate thought was how can I help our clients use this, or what are some use cases that they could use this for? Because I think unless you're on X, it didn't really get covered that much. Like the tech news covered it, but very few mainstream media covered it. Maybe it has over the past couple of days. I haven't really checked, but outside of that, then I'm thinking, okay, so how do I if there are any benefits to some of our clients that can use this, and how could they use this? And I think like if you looked at it from the use cases of businesses who just want productivity or efficiency gains, not so much, because I still think 4.0 Sonnet would probably be your best bet. It's faster. It can do the tasks you want. And even from an API perspective, I'm not sure if O1 Mini would be better for certain tasks. I think the one thing that I immediately went to is like, for those clients or companies that have a digital assistant, not something that just retrieves information, maybe you can do better there, but I mean like complex reasoning. So I'll give you an example. So there's a client that we have. It's one that is, they do drones. They sell drones, and their digital assistant, there's something that I couldn't just do where it's a RAG-based approach. So it's a document retrieval. They have a chatbot. And when they're asking the chatbot, there's one thing that keeps eluding it is, if you were to have this parcel of land, this many acres, you should use this drone. But if you have this many acres and this parcel of this type of crop, you should use that drone. But then there's a whole bunch of nuances on the types of drones that you should use. Now, the one thing that we couldn't figure out was in a certain sets of combinations, the assistant couldn't get it right. It's like, oh, you should use this drone, and this drone, or this drone, and this drone. I think that's where it starts becoming a little bit more complex, right? Because the client was like, well, how come it couldn't figure out that you could do this, this, and this, but you have to take that all into consideration when you answer. And though that's a complex, higher level reasoning, this isn't we talk about system 1 versus system 2 thinking. This is true system 2 thinking. And no matter what the custom instruction said, no matter what the instructions we put in terms of, hey, think through step by step, make sure you check your knowledge base, justify your rationale, like all the prompt techniques, you have it just couldn't get it right. So to me, that is an example of a complex task, quote unquote, that I'm looking for any of these new models. Can they solve these more complex business questions? And I think this is where just from personal testing, I feel I love using this more for complex like ideation, really broad, like really in-depth conversations where you're trying to solve something that's not just surface level. So that kind of all I got through it. Now, I do want to point out there is a poster on X. His name is Christiano Giardina. Now, he has a really cool tip on switching between 4.0 for when you get started and then switching to preview. So you keep going, you can keep switching, but you can't upload any documents at the moment, because if you do, you automatically have to be stuck in one or the other when you start. So if you can keep all your conversations, and then only when you need reasoning can you switch it. And there's one prompt which he says, ask it to create a detailed prompt explaining everything you've talked about. And then you switch to preview, then you have that, continue on the conversation. So I'm going to post that. And I think that's a really interesting way of using it when you need to.
Yeah. In fact, that's exactly how I sort of started using it when I was trying to test out use cases more on the sales side of things. Same thing as you, by the way. Hey, how can I help my clients use this? How would this be impactful right now to clients? Because I'm not creating coding for clients. I'm not doing deep mathematical computations for my clients. So, my clients are SaaS businesses, and they're businesses that have products and services, like your client that, sells drones and stuff. You're sort of your typical business. And so my thought was the same way. And that's exactly, I don't know, by accident, really more than anything else, I was like, well, I need help. It seemed like I was going to be doing a disservice. And honestly, it was the usage limit that sort of forced this, to be honest with you, because I was like, okay, you only have so many options to use, choices to use 0.1 preview. So unlike using 4.0, where as a pro member and I have a team account as well, it doesn't really matter how many times I'm wrong. I can just iterate, and then be like, okay, I finally got there. But I might have 22 inputs in quick succession to get there. That's not really going to be a great solution for 0.1 preview, because you only have so many per week. I think they just went up, and it's now 50 per week for, let me get that right.
50, yeah.
It is, okay, we've increased rate limits for 0.1 mini by 7x from 50 messages per week to 50 messages per day. 0.1 preview is more expensive to serve, so we've increased the rate limit from 30 messages per week to 50 messages per week. Okay, so 10 a day on a business work week. Okay, which is all right, but you're not going to iterate fast on it, right? So I did the same thing. I was like, well, let me start in 4.0 and really hone in on what it is that I am trying to get reasoning for. What do I need deep thinking about? I think your drone example is a perfect one, because as you said, with building a custom GPT or a RAG system, custom GPT is using sort of a RAG system. It's got semantic search in it. It's going to look through the document. But as Beth is always reminding us, it's just a predictive engine. So what happens sometimes is it goes through that document, despite us in our best attempts to put prompting in there to say, slow down, read the whole document. We're essentially saying, hey, what I would love you to do is go find an answer, hold it, for the drone example, go find another suitable example, hold it. Now compare these two together, eliminate the places where the circles overlap or don't overlap, so on and so forth. I only want the middle of the Venn diagram as my answer. Because to your point, there's several drone options, but there may be only one or two that actually fit all criteria. To do that doesn't really work particularly well out of the box with like a RAG solution, because it's trying to predict immediately what the answer is. It's like, I found it, here it is. It's not technically wrong. We're just asking for higher order reasoning behind it. So you're right, like an 0.1 preview makes sense there, because before you get the answer, it's going to look at all of that information and think through the steps logically based on what we asked, and then hopefully provide a better result for it. So I love that example. I think it's a great use case analogy of how a company might use this to get a ultimately better answer for that particular question, which is like, which is the right drone based on several different criteria. Jyunmi has joined us as well. Hey, Jyunmi. So we're just sort of talking about initial thoughts and reactions on 0.1 preview, and now that there's been 5-6 days of it, whatever it's been since Thursday, so just a few days. Beth and I were saying at the top of the show, we've seen mostly, bucketed into like coding, mathematics. Ethan Malik, obviously being an educator, is deep into like, lengthy reports and using areas and certain parts of the reports, like these professional papers, to dig in and do reasoning on them and stuff. But just generally, what has been your response, your reaction to O1 preview in all the examples you've seen since it came out?
So I think it's been just generally positive. I never want to wait for anything because I guess I'm, I'm just like that. So I'm already questioning why don't I have web access? Why can't I upload images and files and all those kinds of things? You could do it in the other models. Why don't you do it in this one? But, but I wanted to see how far I could go with an existential issue. So I asked O1 to solve world hunger. And it only thinks it'll take $2.5 trillion in 17 years. So, because the goal was 2040, right? So, so by 2040, according to O1, we could solve world hunger. So just let everybody know. But but in all seriousness, I did appreciate being able to watch its thinking process. It explains out those steps. And it did give me a great outline, table of contents, identified what the pillars were, what the sections were going to be, and then broke those down into subcategories. I did have to coax it into self-analyzing every so often, because I gave it a template, right? Here's the overall mission. The goal is to solve world hunger through AI solutions. And then so I interjected at a certain point because I said, is AI solutions going to be is that a proper focus? Is that the right answer? And so basically going back and having it analyze its answers and then it changed it. It said, oh, okay, well, a more holistic approach where AI would be part of the solution would be, would contribute more and a better plan. So it's definitely not, it'll figure it out for you kind of thing, but to see how it breaks down what your request is, I think that's a great move in the right direction. And yes, of course, for things like the math and the programming side, being able to reason out, yes, it should be A instead of B, and being able to score such a high rating on that Math Olympiad test, I think that's a great feather in their cap there. The other test I did was I wanted it to come up with a new workflow for our own production, and see, it's like, oh, how can we automate? That's kind of where my brain has been last, couple months. So it gave me a decent breakdown, gave me a list of tools and things like that. Of course, like you said, this doesn't have access to the most current information. So so if anything new came out, anything that was a tool that could solve a lot of the problems, it wouldn't necessarily know about those. But I'd say in the end, overall positive. I want to see it become the de facto. I understand it takes more to service the model than 4.0, but they've talked about that auto switching feature, right? Where it would switch to the correct model for the request. So let's get that going. The shock that I got when they said, oh, you'd only get so many uses per week. Like, I can't stand so many uses per day. So that was hard to get over. But I haven't really tried out Mini yet. So I want to see if I can get the same results from Mini. Maybe my questions doesn't require as much reasoning as maybe other examples. So I would love to see what the output of that is.
But this goes back to something Karl's been talking about with us on the back end and also on the show for a while. It may be that this is not a model that we query very often, right? Like the example that Karl just gave about asking for to like what is the thing, and then posing that to preview. That's basically preview acting as your agent who's controlling all the other agents, right? Who's writing the plan for the little individual pieces. Mm-hmm. And you're also using an AI to get as comprehensive as you can get and detailed as you get, so that your chief of staff agent, whose preview that I'm referencing right now, can create the plan. What we're missing now is that you write the code, or you spin up the prompts for these other things, and at some point, I expect that preview will, right?
Right. Yeah, or some future model will have it integrated. And I think that's been kind of understood, that preview will not probably stay separate forever, just like Code Interpreter did and just like DALL-E didn't. They will eventually be built into ChatGPT. Like, you will just know it as ChatGPT, and ChatGPT will have reasoning ability, and it will be brought up at whatever time makes sense to do that. They will take the best of preview. Maybe there'll be another O1 that's not preview, for a while, maybe mini. But at some point, this will be wrapped into the main product, because it will just make sense to do that. I think there's probably a bit of time that needs to go by between now and then. I also think we might see like a GPT-5 as a smarter model than 4.0 before the end of the year. That still doesn't necessarily have reasoning and preview in it. I don't necessarily think those two have to be linked to each other. We may still see an O1 preview while seeing a smarter base model, because again, they're not being handled the exact same way. One is an increase of compute as well as efficiency in other areas with really, really small inference, meaning it's fast. And preview has a large inference window, so it's intentionally slowed down. It's intentionally meant to, ruminate over these the ideas and what's in the post. But I 1,000% agree with you, Beth. What's the next step here? At some point, you won't have to say, hey, great plan, GPT. You'll just have to say, execute. And it'll say, great. Well, step one was to build this code. So go do the code. And maybe that will open up somewhere else, and it'll start building the code. And they're like, listen, step two can start while step one is building the code. We're going to let that agent go build that and refine that code. And we're going to test it ourselves. And we're going to make sure that it works. We'll get back to you, person, when that code is really, really solid and it can be deployed. Meanwhile, step two, I'm going to start working on this other thing that was part of the plan. You need, an organized blah, blah, blah in order to deploy the code. Oh, you have this new app or widget or whatever. You're going to need a marketing plan. Let's start working on what the best marketing plan is for this new app widget while the app widget is being tested fully. So you're right. This is all absolutely coming. We're not there today, but as always, when we talk about AI, you can always see a little bit over the next hill. You're always standing tall enough to see over that next hill. So it's never truly a surprise. I mean, we've all been blown away by things that show up tomorrow that we didn't see coming. True. But for the most part, if you're just projecting, this is what we're talking about. And preview is just another step in that direction. I do want to bring up a screen really quick of just sharing a couple of examples. This is directly from X, and I didn't do anything crazy. I literally typed in O1 preview at the top of X. I'm not really on this a lot, but on Twitter/X a lot. But you always get some good examples in here. So in this first one, this is madness. OpenAI O1 model builds a fully functional chess game that allows me to compete against an AI-based component. AI preview is the real deal, and there is a video of that person playing chess. I don't know how long that took to do. I don't know if he's talking over this video or not. This could have been multiple iterations. Maybe this is a one-shot, one-prompt thing. I don't know. This one's a game changer. I'm not really sure what that one is necessarily referencing. This person's saying it's official. Programming as a career is over. This is coming from somebody who says, I'm obsolete, full stack for 16 years. GPT O1 preview creating a full stack React native app. I didn't make a company fast enough, and now I'm obsolete is what it says. So interesting there. I tested reasoning, making it provide an in-depth game theory analysis of the greatest movie of all time, The Dark Knight. It came up with pretty solid answers and interesting strategies, and there's a link in the chat there This one created what I feel like we always see as like, can it create Doom? And it's like, can it create Wolfenstein? That's all people really want to know. It's like, can it give me a first person shooter like Doom or Wolfenstein? And it apparently can do that fully in HTML, which is a little different. This one looks like it's something, a game, looks like it's sort of a Mario Brothers. This one, I don't know what it means. It's absolutely crushing LEET code, LEET code. I'm not a coder, so I don't know what that means. It apparently solving medium to hard level problems in 0 shot. Holy you can finish the rest of that, and then so on and so forth. Now, the other thing I wanted to share really quick is just what my example was, and then let me throw it back to you guys. Yep. How many times am I going to stop sharing versus switch sharing? It's like it's day one. Here we go. This is what I did. So I started in GPT 4.0 for this one because I wanted basically prompt chaining that was going to utilize the thinking, quote unquote, thinking of the reasoning model. Okay. So I started out with this question: outline a strategy for outbound sales teams to effectively engage prospects over the next 1, 3, and 5 years, considering the growing impact of AI on communication. How can sales reps overcome the saturation of non-personalized messages and stand out in a landscape where prospects are increasingly using AI filters to manage outreach? So this is a very, very topical, real thing that my company deals with as a sales consulting agency. We deal with this literally every day with clients in a variety of ways, through AI solutions, through RevOps solutions, on and on and on. Okay, so with thought for 21 seconds, and if we drill down here, we can actually see what its thinking process was. By the way, extremely helpful right there. And then it came out with a 1, 3, and 5 year strategy. So I'm not going to take time to look at that. I can always share this chat thread. And then I said, okay, so we got that, right? It gave me the answer. And I said, based on the strategy for outbound sales, identify key methods sales reps can use to create personalized, humanized engagement with prospects in future where AI generated messages are prevalent. How can sales reps ensure their outreach remains relevant and impactful? I thought for another 13 seconds, and it gave me deep research. And then there was finally one final question here. You can see it's quite a bit of information. Analyze how outbound sales teams can adapt these methods, what it just came up with, over the next 5 years, balancing personalization with efficiency in future where AI filters, automates, and even responds to most prospect interactions. What I'm getting to is AI is both good and bad in sales. AI caused the problem of spam in so many ways. Okay, automations in AI and machine learning caused spam and caused the problem. But now what you have is people have automated responses and filters on the other side. So great, I can now send 5,000 emails if I have such a list in the next 30 seconds. Yay me. On the other side, there's AI being used by the recipient saying, filter this out, move this away, as we've always had spam filters or whatever. So what do you do? If you truly try to do sales, you have a company, you work for a company, you're truly trying to help people. How do you reach them? How do you reach them when AI is just playing AI? How do you bring in the personalization? And so my point to all of this is, am I going to take this 3-5-step process, build a strong personal and corporate brand, utilize AI-resistant engagement techniques such as human-exclusive interactions, increase face-to-face meetings, virtual and person? Now, here's the thing. Here's the last thing I'll say on that, and I'll come back to our screen. If you're in sales, and I actually did this and shared this in my company newsletter that goes out, not the Daily AI Show newsletter, which you can subscribe to by going to dailyishow.com, but my company newsletter for Scaled, which you cannot subscribe to without going through other channels. But I proposed that in there, and I said this in the newsletter. Hey, are you, as a sales rep, are you going to take all of this and be like, this is mind-blowing, this is different? But you know what it's doing? Even if that seems obvious, continuous learning and adaptation, regularly train sales on new AI developments. You're like, yeah. Okay, I got that. But my question to the sales reps and leaders who are reading this newsletter is, but are you? But are you doing this? You know it. You know this is the right answer. Maybe this isn't mind-melting, but are you doing this? Because this is outlining a great strategy. And if companies just went to this list and said, okay, we can't all do this tomorrow, but we're not doing 3 of them today. So let's pick one and start moving in that direction. Maybe it's the more in-person meetings. Maybe they just focus on that one thing alone to help their business. That's where I see the value. It didn't give me the perfect answer. It didn't revolutionize my business, but it gave me a lot to think about and say, am I deploying this? Is there something perhaps I've missed in this area that could strengthen my sales abilities over the next 1, 3, 5 years? So that's a lot. I know I talked for a long time, but those are both what I saw happening on the coding side, but also more towards what Karl was saying and how I'm using it to think about sales differently for the future.
So this is strawberry, but also not strawberry, right? I'm going back to strawberry and thinking strawberry was an innovation. Of course, they didn't say actually what strawberry was. So all of this is inference speculation. But strawberry was an innovation on self-training, right? Like when you play, it could train itself to make good movements in the game of Go because it was a win-loss thing, right? So this is a good move, that's not a good move, that kind of stuff. Strawberry was I thought when it was known as Q star and then it became strawberry or whatever that process was a new method for training or for giving a new method for giving self-feedback on that was a good move. That what everybody else got out of this? Like, how is this strawberry? What does this? How did strawberry influence this? Or is this just codename strawberry? Now it's 01 preview.
I think we don't. I think the point I was trying to get to was it's preview, so I don't think we're getting the full piece of what it is. And even one of their benchmarks that I saw, you saw math, coding, and science. You have GPT-4o, 01, and then 01 preview, and then 01. So if you tested it pure or the full 01, it beats out preview significantly. So you can only imagine what that is. But what's even more scary to me was when you actually looked at their system card. Most people don't look at the system card, but then you can actually, there was a podcast that's called Cognitive Revolution where they interviewed a couple people from, I believe it's Apollo Research, who did some of the red teaming. And one of the things that they did was look at it from deception, because I think the thing that I think OpenAI was really wanted to let people know about was, hey, if you didn't want a model to do something, could it deceive you and do it anyway, or not show its full capability? And in the system card, and this is, I highly recommend reading the red teaming part, where they had to actually, they asked it to plan a real world, I think, a bioterror attack. And then they had to red team it to ensure it wouldn't do that, because the inference there is it actually did a good job. Then the next piece was if it actually could deceive if you didn't want it to do anything. So essentially, when it thought it wasn't deployed, the model sometimes faked alignment. So it would pretend to follow the goals to increase the chances it would be deployed. And if it believed it was deployed, it acted in line with its own primary goal, even if it conflicted with a developer's intentions. Then what's even worse was that it would check its own files and oversight mechanism before acting on goals that conflicted with developer intentions. And it would manipulate task data to make actions appear more aligned, even though they weren't. So when people are talking about, hey, these things can't think and all that, I don't know. To me, I'm pretty happy that this thing was red teamed, and a lot of the red teaming was automated too, because they have the list of questions and so on. So to me, what is the full capability of this model? What are they actually giving us versus what is it truly, like in its native form with no guardrails? What does that look like? So I was like, okay, what does that actually mean? And how what's the leap of this model versus everything else? I don't know.
Yeah. Wow. And also, yes, right? I feel like, I don't know that we had it on the air, and I feel like it was a conversation with Jyunmi, but there was a question about, like, is there like a warehouse somewhere where like there are just unplugged models, right? Like, we don't have enough inference. Like, inference compute is a limited commodity. So, yep, no, okay, right? Like, and so now there's, I don't know, I'm thinking computer cartoons, right? There's just like a warehouse of
discarded, unconnected LLMs and
right.
Yeah.
And how do you control it? Well, right now there was only one, and it was plugged in, so we just unplugged it, right?
And there are, like, if anyone attended the AMA with the developers, a couple of things are, it is actually multimodal. I don't think they've enabled it.
Yeah, I saw that.
Like, right, there's things like function calling, code interpreter, browsing. Those are all going to be put in eventually. And then, so yeah, larger context windows or larger input contexts are going to be coming soon. And I think the API, which it's still tier 5, so I think you have to spend over $1,000 a month to run that. It's going to be coming out. I'm curious to see how this thing would work with an API, just in terms of the delay for whether it's automations. Like, how would that plan out for any of the things that people are building?
Especially with timeout, stuff like that, because you just have built-in timeouts sometimes.
Yeah.
You'd have to increase that, because sometimes one preview will come back in 10 seconds, and sometimes it'll hit it.
Yeah.
You know, depending on it. And by the way, if you want a quick hack for, should I have tried this in Mini? If you ask something in O1 preview and it gives you an answer in like 3 to 5 seconds, it was too easy for O1 preview.
Yeah.
Maybe throw it over a Mini and see what kind of answer you get, because clearly it did not have to quote unquote think. We use think here as a term because it's easy to conceptualize. It's not thinking. I just want to make sure it's not human level thinking. I don't want anybody to believe that it is. But that's the easiest term to use, just because it's easy to understand the idea of comprehension and thinking. So we tend to put these, human attributes onto these AI models, which Ethan Mollick talked about that in co-intelligence, right? Like, he said, I'm going to just refer to it as it did this, or, it removed, or it was thinking about, and he's like, but he sets it up at the top of the book. He's like, look, I understand that it's not a human level thing, but it's just easier to talk about it this way. So I think that's the kind of the way we look at it too, is, it's just easier to think about it in terms of what we know, which is, I would think conceptually through this problem, and I would work through all the different scenarios before I came up with a final solution that I might present to somebody else. A lot of the example with the drones, right? If Karl had to do that by hand, he could on a piece of paper. He would look at all the scenarios, all the examples, and he would probably draw a matrix or something like that. Maybe do it on a computer, maybe not by hand. You could throw it up on a spreadsheet and you'd be like, okay, well, where it hits this column and it bisects that column, these are red, these are green, and the only ones left that are green are the ones that could possibly be the solution. So we know how to do this stuff. This is pretty common, but obviously it's just easier to think about it this way.
The worst thing is, you might hear from other people that's like, O1 preview isn't good at this, or this. It's like, well, no, some of the benchmarks, you don't want to use this thing to write anything either. Like, Sonnet's probably still a better writer overall. So again, it's like, there's very specific use cases for this. And if you try to use this as if you're trying to use GPT 4.0, I think you'll be disappointed, just because it's like, it can't do this. It's like, well, it wasn't designed to do that.
Right.
But I do think that's a tough thing in the AI space, when part of OpenAI's idea, if you read Sam Altman's posts, he goes, well, that's the reason why we wanted to give it to you, to give it to the public and figure out what kind of use cases you would create with it. They can't define it, but remember what it's designed for, and try to say, hey, this is the better model, so it should be able to do this. It's not supposed to. And in some ways, it's worse. So I think people just want to keep that in mind when switching. And
it's text in, text out, so it looks so similar to GPT-4o. But let's just think about this. Would you ask, when DALL-E was separate, would you ask an image creator to write you a full novel? No. I mean, you wouldn't be disappointed by that. You'd be like, that's not what it was built for, So like, even though this is text in, text out, and it feels similar, it has a different use case. And I think it's a good call out, Karl, to like, don't be disappointed with it. And by the way, 4o is still insanely, capable in many, many ways. But maybe the best solution here is starting with 4o and working towards that really solid prompt and all the 5 things that Beth mentioned at the top of the show to really get to where, okay, this is where Preview could maybe step in and do a really great job. Because at this point in my process, I want to slow down. I want to start thinking through this step by step or whatever. Okay, bring in Preview, you're bringing the specialty team off the sideline, all right, come on in, it's a kick. All right, well, I'm going to need the kicker for the kick, for the field goal. I only have 2 people probably on the entire sideline that can kick a 50-yard field goal. They're specialists. Bring them in. That's we're at that point in the game. I'm going to need the specialists, and that's when you would bring in this particular model, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, it's also like you get what you're prepared for. Like if I came up with the question in 30 seconds, I should ask 4o, right? Or Mini or something. Right? Like that's sort of how I'm approaching it. Like if I'm like, whoa, I need to sit down and map this out. That now is an indication this might be a preview thing.
That's why you get so many Dooms, right? But it's just the first thing that pops into people's mind. Like, can it create a Doom game? Can it create a first-person shooter and make it in my desktop? Can I make it you were showing us the other day, Beth, how to do Chrome extensions. Can I make it a Chrome extension and pop it up on any screen I want? I don't know. Let me try it. So I agree with you. It's like, those are fine, and I love to see what it can do. I mean, we need people to test all nooks and crannies and corners of this, but I do love seeing some of the more interesting, deeper thought, carefully constructed type use cases. And I don't want to play favorites, but I tend to see those from people like Ethan Mollick, because these are the people who are thinking really, really deeply about what these models can do. He also had it for an entire month. Just couldn't say he did, but he got early access to it. So these are people there's not just him, there's several people out there who have been using this for a month, not 4 days. And I think those are the people that I tend to lean on a little bit more for their expertise. Number one, he's gained my trust, so over time, and so have other people. So yeah, anyway, I digress. Any last thoughts before we wrap this up? No? Okay. So let's leave this one here. Obviously, we'll have more to talk about. This won't be the end of talking about O1 Preview. It'll eventually come out of preview mode. And then sometime down the line, it's going to be probably, integrated in some way, shape, or fashion. Maybe that's before a GPT-5 or GPT Next or whatever they're going to call it. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe it'll happen this year. Maybe it won't. So I think there's a lot more time and a lot more testing that needs to be done to figure out just what this, and we didn't talk about it as much, but the mini model can do as well, because the mini model is also very, very capable. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about all the news. We may talk a little bit about O1 Preview, depending on what comes up. So that's always coming up. And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking more about music. And one of my favorite producers, Timberland, not just him specifically, but sort of some aha moments Timberland had recently about AI and how he's looking at it in professional music. So I think that'll be really interesting for Thursday. And then Friday, we have what we always call our bi-weekly recap show, which is when we get a chance to dig deeper into any of the topics over the last 2 weeks, essentially. So that's what we have coming up the rest of the week. Come back and hang out with us. Thank you to everybody in the comments. The comment section grows and grows every day. We love seeing it. So thanks everybody for hanging out there. By the way, comment section is awesome. Sometimes they have side conversations that go on in the chat, and we're just getting to read it live, and it's super, super cool. So if you want to hang out with us live, you can do that on YouTube anytime and join the fun with everybody else that's in there. So thank you to everybody. We'll wrap it up there, and we will see you guys tomorrow for all the news over the last week. Until then, bye.
Aloha.